Well, thank you everybody for showing up. And I'm really excited, like Jason was talking about. This has been a culmination of the last 3 to 4 months of research. At the start of this, I really didn't have a good grasp on email security whatsoever. And through this, I feel like I've understood a lot of the mechanics. And as the title says, the inherent flaws of email security. And I'd like to share that in a way that kind of walks through each of the process and in a way that you can understand a bit more. So as Jason said, I'm Jack. I'm a pen tester here at Black Hills. I mainly focus on web apps and APIs. So this is branching out a little bit, but yeah, let's jump right into it. So the overarching concepts that I want to go throughout this presentation are going to be getting you understanding how email works, the different security protocols that are there, the inherent flaws in those security protocols, some misconfigurations, and then the MailFail Extension, which is the aggregate of all my research into one place that'll automate a lot of this for you. So some takeaways, some hard skills that you'll learn throughout this are going to be how to send emails with SMTP, how to bypass SPF, how to bypass DKIM, how to crack DKIM keys, how to spoof emails, DMARC misconfigurations, and then how to use MailFail, the browser extension, to automate a lot of this searching, a lot of this parsing, and finding these misconfigurations, which is good for both blue team and red team. So to start out with a little bit of terminology, you'll hear me talk about SMTP and MTAs. SMTP is a protocol, simple mail transfer protocol. It was written in the early 80s, and it is the language which mail transfer agents or your email server use to communicate between servers. So when they send the email from one server to the other, they communicate it over this protocol. So we're going to walk through an example. Imagine you're using the Gmail client. You're drafting up an email. You're about to hit send. And in this case, it's going to be Larry at Google. And he's trying to send an email to Jeff at Amazon. So since it's from google.com, it goes to Google's MTA server, mail transfer agent. That mail transfer agent then talks to Amazon's MTA server. That MTA server receives the email and then allows Jeff at Amazon to add that to his inbox. This is the general flow about how emails are transferred across the internet. So let's take a little bit closer look at this SMTP commands that MTAs send back and forth. SMTP is a pretty simplistic protocol. Like here are 5 commands, and this is the majority of everything you're going to need to know for SMTP. You realistically only need to know 4 of these. The first one is hello, which initiates the SMTP connection. You say who you are, and it's kind of like the self-declaration of starting communication. Start TLS is not always needed, but this creates an end-to-end encrypted channel between the MTAs. Mail from is the SMTP from address. Recipient to is the SMTP to address. Then you type data, and anything after that is the email body, and that's what the user will see in their email client. So to make this make a little bit more sense, we're going to walk through a lot of demos or more demonstrations. So here we have the MTA server, but what if we're a malicious MTA? Because email is probably one of the largest decentralized services on the internet. Anybody can spin up their own email server, and anybody can talk to these email servers using these SMTP commands. So if we position ourselves in a place where we can talk to Amazon's MTA server, we issue some commands, we could potentially spoof emails. So this is where I'd like to point out that I'm going to walk through 4 or 5 different demos, and I know some of you might want to follow along and copy and paste. So on the website, Jason should be posting the link now in Discord. I have a website where all of the commands can be found, and you could go there, you scroll a little bit to the bottom, each demo has all the commands so you could follow along. Our first demo is going to be sending an email. So We're going to talk over using Telnet, and we're going to use those previous SMTP commands. We're going to act as a mail transfer agent, or an MTA. And just for this demo, there's going to be no anti-spoofing checks. We're going to start at a base level with no security, and we're going to work our way up. We're going to slowly add security till the end of the talk, and then show you how to bypass each level. So there's no anti-spoofing here. So we're going to use 10-minute mail, which, if you're not familiar, gives you email addresses that are valid for 10 minutes. We're going to first look up the MX address, which gives us the domain that we have to send emails to if we want to send emails to that domain. We connect over port 25. We say, hello, we're nsa.gov. And then we say the mail from is going to be security at nsa.gov. We're going to say recipient to, and this is who we're sending the email address to. So we copy that. Note the angle brackets in the mail from and recipient to. And the last portion. So everything previously, the user will not see in the email. That's only for the protocol. Now, everything below this data command is what the user will actually see. So here's a second from address, and we're going to say from security at nsa.gov. We're going to send this to the 10-minute mail address. We provide a subject, a body, and then to terminate the email, you hit enter, and you can see that it's a 250 OK. And we come in here and we get our email. So I hope everyone was able to follow that. If not, you could go to the website, and all the commands should be there if you want to replicate that. I know we went a little fast. So instead of sending all these SMTP commands, there's an easier way. If you have access to a PowerShell environment, so on Windows, you can use this commandlet called Send-MailMessage, where you could provide the SMTP server, you provide the to address, and then you can specify a from address, subject, and body as normal. And in one command, you can connect to the server, send all of those commands, and then send the body of the email. So let's do that. We're going to do 10-minute mail again. It's going to be roughly the same demo, but now we're just going to do it in one command instead of issuing each command individually for SMTP. So we need to find out where to send the email, which is why we issue this DNS request. We ask for the MX record of this domain, which points us to this other domain, and that's where we're going to be sending the emails. So if you didn't know, Kali Linux has PowerShell built in now, so you can run this from a Kali machine. So here we go. We pasted that MX record result. We say to the 10-minute mail address, and we're going to say from Jack at Harvard. With my congratulation email on my acceptance. And the last flag is going to be body as HTML. And this is going to tell it format the message in a way that it can be rendered by HTML. You'll note that there's it sent it twice, and that's an issue with the 10-minute mail client. But you can see it's from Jack at Harvard, went to our inbox, and gave us our message. So those are two ways that you can just touch and interact with these mail servers and try and send some emails. A lot of the times, it's not going to work this easy for the reasons that we're going to go into next. So there's this thing called Sender Policy Framework, and this was the first attempt at creating some type of authorization within email. And we're going to walk through a practical demo first so that you could kind of get the gist of the order of events before we go into the other demos. So starting here, we're going to use the same format as previous, and we're going to send an email from Larry at Google to Jeff at Amazon. So Google's MTA server issues those SMTP commands that we just previously did. And in the SMTP from, it says Larry at Google. SMTP2, it says Jeff at Amazon. The Amazon server looks at the SMTP from address, extracts the domain, and then issues a DNS request and to grab back all of the TXT records. One TXT record will start with this prefix, v equals SPF1. And if it does, that's indicating that this domain has an SPF record. SPF records identify which IP addresses are allowed to send email on behalf of that domain. So in this case, we have IP address 1234, and Google's MTA server, luckily, has the IP address 1234. So in that case, Amazon does the comparison, everything checks out. And so now we know Google has authorized this IP address to send emails. So Jeff gets his email. Now, what if we're an attacker? And we try and do the same thing. So I'm at IP address 5555, and I send SMTP from google.com, Larry at Google. It does the same checks. It comes back and says, Google has only authorized 1234, and you're 5555. So it does the simple check, and SPF has failed. All right. So now, if you haven't figured it out, the bypass is that the area that it checks the domain from is 1, attacker controlled, and 2, not what is shown to the user in their email. So as I was alluding to before, there's the SMTP from header, and then there's the normal from header in the body of the email. The from header in the body of the email is what the user will see in their mail client. The SMTP from is only used for this SMTP protocol. So if an attacker sets their SMTP from as evil@attacker.com, but their from as Larry at Google, Amazon's MTA server will then look up attacker.com, which the attacker can set to point at their own IP address. So now the attacker has authorized themselves for SPF. So SPF has now been bypassed. And now, in this case, Jeff would receive the email and it would say Larry at Google. So a few things about SPF. As we were talking about, SPF ensures that the SMTP from domain explicitly allows the connecting IP address. SPF does not ensure that the email address seen by the user is the one which was checked, which is an inherent flaw in SPF and is also something that even the authors of SPF noted in the initial proposal. So down here is RFC 7208, and this is in the attack section, I believe. So they note, the mail from and the hello identity authorizations do not provide assurance about the authorization of other identities used in the body of the message is what it means. So up here, you could see if we were to issue these SMTP commands, we would say, hello, we're from attacker.com, mail from jack@attacker.com. But in the body of the email, we just say, this is Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook. And that's what would be shown to the user. So another demo. I'm a big Billy Joel fan, so we're going to use his website as an example. So this is the extension. I guess I could pause here. And when you're on a website, you click that extension and it'll open up a secondary window, and MailFail will run, it seems, I think, tens, if not hundreds of checks across different protocols and format everything nicely into boxes for you. So here we see Billy Joel has an SPF record that it found, and it has 2 include statements, and then it has this tilde all. And the tilde all, if you're familiar with like firewall rules or it's a base case where it says if the result isn't in these, if the IP address isn't in these, then deny everything else. Just forget about it. So MailFail has shown us, since it's highlighted in green, their SPF record is configured correctly. So even with their SPF configured correctly, right here I'm showing I have a TXT record set on spf.mailfail, and it points to my current IP address. So this curl command is just getting my IP address. And so if I present this domain, it'll authorize myself. This is the precondition that you have to set up beforehand. So again, we're going to telnet, but this time we're going to telnet into Proton Mail over port 25, because that's where SMTP lives. And we're going to say, hello, this is spf.m.al.fail. So MailFail. MailFail was taken, so I have to break it up a bit. And then we're going to say the mail from is literally anything bypass at spf.mailfail. And remember, when it looks that up, it's going to point back to my IP address. So the recipient is going to be this Proton address that I created for the demonstration. Now, this is where it's going to differ. In the body of the email, I'm going to say, I'm not actually coming from MailFail. I'm coming from jack@billyjoel.com. And I'm going to send it to Proton Mail, my address. Give it a subject. The message identifier is how email clients can track replies to emails. It's like threads in emails. That's how it works. So this just has to be a unique string. It doesn't matter what it is. And then we're going to give a nice body. So enter.enter says we're done writing our email. And then we get a 250 OK queued. We go back to the inbox. It goes straight to our inbox. Come here. It says jack@billyjoel.com. There's no indication that it's spoofed. It says sing us a song. Now, I'll pause here for a second. This is the raw email that's received by your mail client. It allows you, pretty much every mail client will let you go and see these headers. And in this header is a lot of juicy information. It shows you all the authorization. It shows you, potentially spam scores and whatnot. So to make this easier and more legible to parse, I'm going to use this tool, paste it in there, and we could see SPF is passed. So we successfully bypassed SPF. We used my domain, authenticated myself, and then used that to send an email from billyjoel.com. And then there you go. There's the authentication results. And it says SPF equals pass. So that's get past SPF. So not every mail client treats this the same way. Oh, I think my internet's a little unstable. Okay. So other mail clients will, yeah. Can everyone still hear me?
Yep, you're good.
I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, you're good to go.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah, I'll pop back in it if.
So other mail clients don't. Okay. Thanks, Jason. So other mail clients don't treat this all the same way. SPF gives a either pass or a fail, but it doesn't give description to the receiving MTA of what you should do with this email that either passes or fails. It just gives you that result. And then the receiving MTA has to make a determination based on that and kind of create their own rules. This is fixed later on, but we'll touch on that. So here's Yahoo Mail, which doing the same spoof, sends it to spam, but doesn't give any indication of why it's sent to spam. It still says jack@billyjoel.com, gives the message that I provided, as opposed to Outlook, which puts this via SPF .mailfail, which some of you might have seen in your mail clients once in a while. This is saying that the SMTP from is this. Meanwhile, the from in the email is this. And this is a good deterrent, but also you could buy a doppelganger domain. You could buy more of a generic domain that says like emailforwarder.com. And I think a lot of users would overlook this as well. What they won't overlook is the giant warning message right here. So in Outlook, if you bypass SPF, it'll give this and say, hey, this might be spoofed. It doesn't specifically call out SPF, but it says there's something fishy about this. And Gmail does the same thing. It gives you the via SPF MailFail and then gives you this big warning. But in all cases, here's Yahoo, SPF passed, Gmail, SPF passed, Outlook, SPF passed. And we previously showed Proton Mail, it passes as well. So this goes on to the second main security protocol implemented, which is DKIM, or Domain Keys Identified Mail. DKIM, you could think of it as SPF deals with IP addresses, and it's making sure that the domain has authorized your IP address to send email on behalf of it. DKIM uses public and private keys to cryptographically sign parts of an email. It uses the private key to cryptographically sign it, and then it posts the public key publicly so that receiving MTAs can verify the signature. So let's walk through an example with that. It's the same setup as before. We have Google's MTA. We're trying to send from Larry at Google to Jeff at Amazon. But the one addition is this DKIM signature header. This is added by Google's MTA server, and it supposedly uses Google's private key to sign certain headers within the email. And then it attaches this cryptographic hash so that other people can verify using their public key. So in this case, Amazon receives this, and it extracts this domain from the D = field. So Google has declared that this is the domain you should use, and this is the selector. A selector can be literally anything. It's just a way for them to identify which public key to select. So over here, Amazon constructs this query that looks up the DNS TXT record for the selector name, _the domain key, the domain name. So this _domain key is it'll never change, but it's always selector, _domain key, the domain name. And you get those from these two pieces of information right here. So DNS comes back and it returns something like this. V = DKIM1, which specifies, hey, this is a DKIM key. K = RSA, which is saying we're using RSA, which is a asymmetric encryption algorithm. And P = a very long string. That's going to be a base 64 encoded public key. So Amazon doesn't really care about any of this stuff. It only cares about that base 64 encoded public key that's very long. So it's going to extract that public key. It's going to then take this email that it was just given, and it's going to make sure that this signature right at the bottom matches and is valid. And if the signature is valid, then DKIM passes. So in a case where an attacker tries to do the same thing, let's say you're trying to do the same thing and send the message from Larry at Google to Jeff at Amazon, and you're trying to use Google's public key. So you use the same one, but you don't have the private key. So you don't have a way to sign these headers. The date header, which isn't here, but just imagine to and from. So what happens is Amazon goes out, grabs the declared domain and selector, comes back and says, that doesn't match this signature. Well, I didn't give it a signature because I don't have the private key. And also, if I put anything like random letters and numbers there, it also won't match. Only the person that holds the private key can sign this message. So it's a pretty good system. It's it's intended to authorize that the user that holds the private key, which is, supposedly the domain, so google.com, can only send these emails. Now, here's the bypass. If you haven't figured out already, we're doing the same type of thing as before. The place that they extract the domain is not this domain of the from address. It's actually the domain inside the header, which we control. So we could just put attacker.com, give a selector, and make Amazon's MTA server use our own DNS key. So it goes out. And we receive the same type of message back, but now it's our own public key. The signature is valid because the attacker owns their own private key. So we can bypass DKIM. So DKIM is used to ensure that the emails to and from headers are correctly signed with the specified domain's private key. It doesn't ensure that the email is signed by the domain that's shown to the user in the email. It also does not cryptographically sign the email body, which is a pretty common misconception. A lot of people think DKIM keeps the integrity of the body of the email, but it actually doesn't in reality. It only signs certain headers within the email, which are the to header, the from header, and maybe like one or two other ones. So that's some things to note. And this is the same format that we were talking about before. All DKIM public keys are found in TXT records in this format: selector._domain key .domain name. So a DKIM signature header is added to the email by the sending MTA with the signature data. So the sending MTA holds the private key. Here's an example of what one looks like sending from the MailFail domain. These are the headers I'm going to sign in the email. And this B equals is actually the public key, and BH is going to be the hash, the cryptographic hash that's used as a signature. Here's our selector. So in this case, our selector is 1024. Your selector can be anything. So in this case, I just chose 1024. It doesn't matter. And over here, our domain is MailFail. This is also the part of the RFC, so where this protocol was proposed, where they assert that this is how it's intended to function, but it's also broken. So a DKIM signature associates the D equals name with the computed hash of some or all of the message. So let's abuse this. Here's my favorite North Korean propaganda site, friend.com.kp. And first thing we're going to do is launch MailFail. So this website's actually kind of interesting. It's only one of a dozen North Korean sites. And it's pretty much the equivalent of like MSN for us. Anyway, regardless, they don't have a DKIM key. If they did, it wouldn't matter either way. But that's just showing the MailFail output. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to try and generate our own key. So again, all of these commands are going to be on the website if you scroll down into the demo section. So right here, we're generating the private key. So DKIM 1024 private key. And then we're going to use that private key to generate our public key. So we're going to input the private key, output the public key. We're going to type out the public key so we could use it. And now in DNS, you have to remove those headers. You have to remove new lines. And now the key is in a format that we can use. So we go to the DNS provider and we're going to enter in that selector ._domain key. And then I do .m because I do MailFail, but this selector can be anything you want. This is where you would change it. Now we're going to write out the DKIM key. So V equals DKIM1, which all of them have to start with that. K equals RSA. And then we're going to do P equals the really long string that we just formatted. And then you can see it right there. Hit create. Says it's good. So just to double check that that's been registered and cached and sent out through DNS, we're going to do a dig, and then we're going to provide the selector ._domain key .mailfail. And this returns the key that we just set. And you could double check that by matching the first few. So here's a script that I wrote where you can supply a private key, and you can sign and send DKIM signed messages. This is also a part of the commands that are on the website. So if you're wondering where I got this, there's a link to it. It's also on my GitHub as a gist. So here's the whole command, but only this top part is where you're going to need to modify. There's a lot of like to-dos in the normal one. I have it all filled in here. So we're going to be sending it to my Proton Mail email. We're going to be using Proton Mail's SMTP server. We're going to give the attacker domain, which is my MailFail. We're going to supply the private key that we just generated ourselves. And then we're going to use the selector. And then within the body of the email, we're going to specify who we want to spoof. So at this point, we're going to do jack@friend.com.kp. Give it a subject and a nice body message. All right. So next thing you got to do is just run it. It's going to print out the body of the email. So this is all the contents that you would see after typing the data command. And then eventually it'll just exit out. So if we refresh our inbox, we have a nice message from our friends in North Korea. So we go to the headers of the message. Again, it's a little hard to like read all this, so I'm going to send it into the to this analyzer just to make it easier for the demo. And then there you go. You can see DKIM has passed. And to show you exactly where in the message, it says right there, authentication results. So all of these headers are appended by the receiving MTA, and it's the results of them doing all their due diligence. So all of the other ones for DMARC is none, SPF is none, ARC is none, DKIM is pass. So up here, I'm showing that DKIM is equal to pass, and it's using our 1024-bit RSA key. And then down here, you can see this is the header that was checked. We supplied our own domain, MailFail. We supplied our own selector. And then since we supplied our own domain, we have the associated private key. So we could sign our own messages. So right now you got to be thinking like email is terrible. These are the two main authentication protocols, and they both can be bypassed somewhat trivially. So how does email still function today? Oh, I actually have a few more slides. Sorry. We'll get into that. So other mail clients. Here's what Outlook does. There's no via like there is with SPF, but it does give you that really ugly warning message. Again, it's kind of the Wild West with email clients. They all interpret these things in their own way. So it's hit or miss whether you'll go in. So you got to do a lot of testing if you're blue team, red team, and see which one works. All right. So now this is a fun part of the talk. We're going to be talking about cracking DKIM RSA keys. So if you have a key that's less than, let's say, 800 bits, it's theoretically possible to crack. MailFail will identify these for you, and it'll. So over here, we have an output, right? This is the MailFail website. It identifies a DKIM selector. And just to make sure everybody knows this, there's no possible way to list all DKIM selectors unless you have the zone file. So MailFail does this by brute forcing each selector, and it brute forces it using a list that I've created. It's publicly accessible. It's on the GitHub. The list is a culmination of other lists that I found online, my own experience, a lot of stuff like that. So this is the DKIM selector. Here's our DKIM results. And MailFail will take that public key that's base64 encoded. It will put it into a crypto library. I extract the RSA key size. That's how we know if it's too small and it's weak. If it's less than that, let's say 800 bits, I think there's 312, there's 512, and then 768 are the three that you'll realistically see. It gives you the selector, and then it takes the public key and extracts the modulus, which is in hex, and converts it to base 10 for you, which I'll tell you why that's really nice. I used to have to do this by hand, but this automation makes it a lot easier to crack these keys. This public key, which is n, if you know the equation, is a very long number, really, really big number. And it's the product of multiplying two very big prime numbers. So if you can find the two prime numbers that multiply to equal this very large number, you have the private key, okay? So the RSA key size of 512, this is theoretically possible. With MailFail, it gives you another message that says, hey, this is cryptographically insecure, and the DKIM private key can be recovered in about 2 days for roughly $30 of compute, which is true. So I give you all the commands step by step on how to break this. And the one thing you need is this very large number in base 10. And that's already done for you. And it's also even entered into the command. So you don't really have to do anything but run these. If you get a pretty beefy DigitalOcean droplet, like you see here, it's about $1 an hour. But you're not going to be needing to run it for a month. 1 day, 2 days max. This should be able to crack it. It uses this program called Cato NFS, which stands for Number Field Sieve, which is this whole concept of number theory and how to factor prime numbers, which you don't need to know. All you need to know is how to run these commands and then check on it in maybe a day or so. I have had issues where it runs out of RAM, so you might need to bump the RAM up once in a while, but other than that, you should be good with this configuration. So you run that, and then what you're going to be left with is two prime numbers. And then you're going to be thinking to yourself, like, what do I do with these two prime numbers? Like, I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a crypto guy. Like, so that's what we're here to show you. I have a key that's on MailFail's website that uses 512-bit RSA. And I went through the process. I recovered the two prime numbers that are associated to the public key, and this starts from there. How do we reconstruct the private key using those two prime numbers? So I have another script that's also on the GitHub. It's also on the website, a link to it. So this is publicly available. So I did not write the script. That was giving credit to where credit's due. It was somebody in a RSA IRC channel. So here, if you remember from crypto class, n equals PQ. This is the premise of RSA, and I promise I won't go too into the weeds on this. But n is what MailFail extracted, and that's the really big number. Okay, and that is the product of multiplying these two really big prime numbers. So when you run that program, it'll give you the two really big prime numbers. And that's what we're entering here. Order doesn't matter. It's cumulative. Okay. So if you run the script after you enter your P and your Q, it'll give you this private key. And this is the private key that the server has. So we want to export that to a file. So we just say cracked private key.pem. Throw that in there. I hit enter, Control C. All right, so now we have their private key for MailFail on our disk. So we're going to modify Oh no. I hit the wrong button. Okay. So now we're going to modify that script. Oh no, why is it doing this? We're going to modify the script that was also previously used. So the script I wrote for sending DKIM signed emails, and we're going to modify it to use the cracked private key. And instead of doing a North Korean website, we're going to just do jack at MailFail, because now we have MailFail's private key. So we're going to impersonate them. So we run the script, it outputs the body of the email just so you can see it. We refresh, and notice that it goes to spam. So we cracked the private key, we signed it correctly, but Proton Mail gives us this little warning message. We go in the headers, and in the authentication results, we see DKIM has failed, even though it hasn't actually failed. It says public key is too small, 512. So a lot of mail clients now have realized these small keys are legacy, and they're sitting out there. A lot of top 1,000 websites still have, 512, 768-bit RSA keys. That it doesn't matter if the company is using it at all. An attacker can use their own key against them. So if a company comes back and says, hey, like, we're not even using that key, it doesn't matter. You're publicly advertising that this is your associated public key. And if someone could crack the private key, they can use that to impersonate you. But luckily, in a lot of cases, this has been, if it's too small of a private key and it's known that it can be cracked in a reasonable amount of time, a lot of these mail clients will just say, that looks a little too fishy. We're not going to use it. But there are other applications. So something that maybe other people might want to look into, and myself included, is like DNS has become this public key, it's become this infrastructure for public keys. And it's not just limited to email. So if these companies are using that public key to authorize themselves in other applications, in other protocols, other ways, then you can impersonate them in other contexts. I'm not sure what that would be, but if anybody has any ideas, feel free to reach out. So SPF, this is what I was talking about before. SPF and DKIM, that's pretty much most of what you have for security around email. And both of those can be bypassed. So how is email just not completely broken at this point? And it's this concept of DMARC, which is domain-based message authentication. And DMARC succeeds in the ways that all the previous ones have failed. And let's walk through how this would work. So DMARC builds on top of SPF or DKIM. So something to realize is that to do DMARC, we have to first do SPF, which is what we're going to go through in this demo. You could do DKIM also, but for simplicity, we're just going to do SPF to start off. So as we remember, SPF looks at the SMTP from address, extracts the domain, and then asks for all the TXT records associated with that domain. Comes back and it says, hey, google.com has authorized IP address 1234. Like we previously said, Amazon's MTA receiving mail server says, oh, that's great. SPF is passed. Fantastic. Now DMARC kicks in. Okay. DMARC, if you didn't notice, this switched from the SMTP from domain to the from domain. DMARC uses the domain that is going to be shown to the user, and then it uses that to find the policy. Well, I'll go back here. DMARC has this prefix. At the root of the domain, there's underscore DMARC dot the domain name. And if you ask for a TXT record to that, you're going to get something that looks like this. V equals DMARC1. And it's going to give a policy of reject. Okay. That policy can change, but for this demo, it's going to be reject. Okay. Now, Amazon's MTA server goes up here and says, does the SMTP from domain match the from domain? And if it's true, alignment has passed. DMARC has added this concept of alignment, and that's what that means. So if SPF passes, alignment passes, DMARC passes. So this pretty much fools all of the previous attacks that we've done where they've been extracting the domains from the wrong parts. So here we have attacker 5555. We're going to go through the same process of SPF. And we tried to be clever right here and spoof the SMTP from as Lariat attacker. So Amazon queries attacker, comes back and says, oh, the attacker has authorized 5555. It's his lucky day. That's his own IP address. So SPF passes. Now DMARC kicks in. DMARC looks at this from address, goes, let's get the policy from Google. And here's the policy, starts with DMARC 1, so that's how we identify it. And the policy is reject. Now DMARC does the alignment check. The alignment fails here. Attacker.com is not equal to google.com. So alignment fails. So DMARC fails. SPF and DKIM do not give any guidance of what you should do with emails that fail these checks. DMARC does. This policy equals reject explicitly tells Amazon if DMARC fails for whatever reason, reject the email entirely. Do not send it to Jeff at Amazon. Now there's different policies. There's three. There's none, there's quarantine, and there's reject. We'll touch on each one of those in a little bit. Okay. So now let's say for theoretically, the DMARC policy is none. SPF has previously passed, alignment still fails, but DMARC passes. Well, that should actually say DMARC fails, but the email still gets delivered. And the reason for that is even though DMARC fails, the policy is don't take any action, which goes straight to the user's inbox. Okay. If it was quarantine as the policy, quarantine means go to spam, go to the spam folder. So it either goes to your inbox, goes to your spam folder, or it doesn't get delivered at all. Those are the three outcomes. So here's the concept of SPF and DKIM alignment. An important thing to know for DMARC is DMARC passes if either or SPF or DKIM pass and are aligned. So it's not both, it's or. So SPF alignment ensures that the domain in the from address matches the domain specified in the SPF record, confirming the email's authenticity. DKIM alignment ensures that the domain in the from address matches the domain in the DKIM signature, validating the email's integrity. So they do two distinct things. So DMARC specifies what to do with the email, which SPF, and that's supposed to say, which fails SPF or DKIM alignment, it's supposed to say. DMARC allows a domain owner to receive reports of potentially spoofed emails. So this is kind of where it kicks in the title of the presentation that says like, who's spoofing your email? DMARC allows you to get reports of if this fails, the receiving MTA now has an action to report this back to the spoof domain owner. So you can get aggregate reports or forensic reports, which include the body of the email and so on and so forth. We'll touch on that in a second. So DMARC passes if either or SPF or DKIM pass and are aligned. So DKIM and SPF both have their flaws, which make them ineffective at preventing spoofed emails. But luckily, we have DMARC, which builds on top of DKIM and SPF to create an effective defense. SPF and DKIM do not specify an action to take. I think I've harped on that enough. So here's the three policies. Sorry, here's three fields. So we're pretty familiar with P equals by now. That gives us the policy. So that policy is for the root domain. SP gives us the policy for subdomains. If SP is not included, all subdomains default to the root domain policy. And there's a very interesting addition called PCT, which is percent of emails to apply to the policy. This has a lot of implications that I'm not sure people are aware of. It's It's created so that if you want to roll out DMARC gradually, and you don't want emails to be flagged as false positives, you might not have it all set up correctly, you can only apply the DMARC policy to a percentage of the emails sent out. What this effectively does is if PCT equals 60, that means 40% of spam or spoofed emails are allowed through. And to make it even worse, let's say P equals quarantine, which means, if you received a spoofed email, send it to the spam folder. In 40% of the cases, it downgrades that quarantine to none. And the same thing for reject. So in this case, we have percent equals 60. In 40% of the cases, it's going to send the spam. Instead of rejecting it outright, it's going to get delivered to the spam folder. I don't know why they have this. It doesn't make any sense. And you see this actually a lot. It's pretty common. And a lot of people, there's an implicit percent equals 100 if you don't specify it. But some people explicitly say percent equals 100. I don't know. It's a bit convoluted, but MailFail will point this out and it'll give you a written explanation of what the actual policy is. And then it'll point you to the point in the documentation and reference material of exactly where this is found in the RFC. So if you have any questions about that, there's resources. So DMARC reporting. This is how you can set up somewhat like an alerting thing. So in the case of the North Korean website, they didn't have DMARC set up. So that means there's no effective authentication for that domain. They also didn't have a mail server set up because it's a North Korean website. Anyway, but if it was, and let's say they just didn't put their DMARC policy, they don't have a way to tell if someone is spoofing their domain because there's no interaction with their mail server. The attacker is just pretending to be a mail server. So there's no interaction with them. DMARC solves this by adding these RUA and RUF. This means report aggregate and reports forensic. So you specify mail to, this is important. You have to put mail to : like you're sending an email, and then RUA at MailFail or whatever your email address is. And I forgot to do that for this, but just imagine it's RUF at MailFail. And you could specify aggregate reports, which are like maybe daily or weekly emails that say, this is the number of spoofed attempts that there were. These are the IP addresses, and then forensic reports, which actually give you a copy of the email. Forensic reports have their own privacy concerns if you're like a big email provider, such as like Google or Proton Mail or something like that, because then you'll be receiving reports of potentially false positives, and you might be reading someone else's email. So something to note. This FO, it could be either a 0 or a 1. If it's a 1, it means always send forensic reports. If either DKIM or SPF fail alignment, it'll always send reports. If that's sent to 0, which is the default, it will only send forensic reports if it fails both. So DKIM alignment and SPF alignment. So I have 5 minutes, and I haven't even talked about the extension. So that's great. MailFail is a browser extension for Firefox currently, and it automatically checks all of these security configurations for dozens of email security protocols. We talked about 3 here. In the following slide, you'll see there is a lot of protocols. DNSSEC, ADSP. It's just way too much to cover within an hour. I thought I could, and then I started writing the slides for this, and I was like, there's no possible way. Not a shot. So there is lots and lots of content in MailFail. It does all of it for you. It gives you nice documentation, nice readability, and it also provides you commands to exploit or check vulnerabilities. So I have 2 short demos that are using MailFail extension in good and bad scenarios. So Proton Mail, as you would expect, has a very good configuration. This is their MX record. It also has a lot of links that I want to point out. Everything is linked, and it'll autofill the domain in these links. So that SPF record, if you click the SPF header, it brings you to this website that will recursively go through all of the SPF records, and it'll show you every IP address that's authorized to send email. It's a little cumbersome to do with JavaScript, so it's just easier to link to some external sources that do it better. So in DMARC will link you to the same site. It'll show you the DMARC record. I also have some OPSEC tips, OSENT tips. It's pretty much the aggregate of everything I learned in the last 3-4 months into one little tool that you just have to click and it'll do everything for you. It's kind of nice. NS records, not too important. BIMI is, well, we'll see that in a second. MTA, STS, this is like strict transport security if you're familiar with web apps, but between MTA servers. So that ensures that it's end-to-end encrypted. TLS reporting, DNSSEC. Here's a whole diagram of the DNS zone. Here's all the keys, how it breaks down. It's a one-stop shop resource for all of this stuff. And the beauty of this extension is that it really doesn't touch any infrastructure of the domains that you're investigating, because it's all through DNS. And I'll just point out here before we keep going, this extension reaches out to a few websites. It uses Cloudflare for DNS over HTTPS. It uses, what else? Uses Quad9, and I think it uses DuckDuckGo to resolve some icons to prettify the MX records. So keep going here. There's Dane, which is a whole bag of worms, which is a substitute for DNSSEC, but that could be misconfigured for SMTP as well. And it gives you a command to run where you don't need to know any of this stuff is kind of the point of this. You just go, you run the command, and it says verification okay. The website gives you, yeah, so that's the output here. Proton Mail has a Dane authorization fail. You can look more into the stuff if you'd like. I might do a follow-up webcast eventually because there's just too much content here. SRV, that's where you could advertise POP and IMAP. NSEC, this is another really cool thing that's a little unexpected. So if anybody's familiar with AXFR for TCP over DNS, where you can extract the zone file, that's kind of dead. No one sees that anymore. But through the inherent flaws of DNSSEC, there's this thing called NSEC, which means next secure domain. So you can think of this as a linked list, where if you start at proton.me, it will point to mail.proton.me, which will point to, email or calendar at proton.me, and it'll just keep going until it wraps around back to proton.me. So you can do this concept called NSEC walking, where you can extract the entire zone file of a company. So you get all of their records. And the reason this is important for this extension is sometimes companies try and hide their DKIM selectors. But if you have the entire zone file, you can go and find it, even if it's a random string that you would never guess in a million years. There's NSEC3 is a more secure way of doing it. It uses hashing. So you can walk the entire domain, which is what I'm doing here. It's a little bit more cumbersome. There's a little nuance there, but also you can take all of those hashes and crack them offline. And the commands to do that are in the extension as well. I know that's a lot. I'm trying to rush through a lot of this stuff. So here's all of the Proton Mail subdomains. And then you could use these commands, this great tool called N3Map and John, the Ripper, and you could crack all of them. More MX records, SPF, DMARC, BIMI. BIMI is this concept that never really got off the ground. It's a protocol where you can authoritatively link to your image, but then you also have to go to your local copyright office and prove that you're yourself and your company. It's this whole thing. It never really took off, but if some companies use it, and here's a link to their SVG, and that's what you're supposed to use in a mail client when someone sends email from that domain. So that's kind of what that is. And that's their certificate. And then, so you'll notice that if you're on a subdomain, MailFail will first do the root domain, do all the checks, and then do the subdomain and do all the checks, because a lot of the times they're different. goes all the way to the bottom. You'll see here are the DKIM keys. It parses. They're 2048-bit, so that's secure. No one's going to crack that. All right. I'm going to skip through. Here, I know we're at 201, so we're cutting it close, but this is the last demo. And this is MailFail run on MailFail's website, m.ail.fail. And I have configured this in the worst possible way to make my extension scream bloody murder. And that's what it kind of does. This first, if people aren't familiar with Direct Send, it's a Microsoft feature, let's call it, where they allow external users that are unauthenticated to send internal emails. So you can sometimes send internal emails. So let's say CEO@company.com to accounting department at company.com. And you could say, oh, I need this invoice to this, this bank routing number or whatever. And it works. And if you click on this little I, so all of the things within MailFail are either going to be this link icon or this little I icon. And if you see that, that means you can click here to learn more. Steve, one of our testers, has an excellent blog, and that's what's linked to it. So you could do that. SPF misconfigurations. It'll tell you why. It'll link you to the exact page of the RFC, and you can read more there. DMARC, it gives you the command to exploit it. BIMI, the BIMI icon. A lot of this stuff is not supported by the name server I was using, but I did the best job I could. Another thing is SPF specifies a lot of IP ranges, right? And a lot of the times people do a CIDR range where they could do a /24 or whatnot. And I gave an Nmap script that will search that entire range, find SMTP open relays that you can use and abuse to bypass SPF as well. And I see Jason is here to cut me off.
No, you keep going, Chad.
Keep going.
I'm just here
okay.
to.
You sure?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Let's keep going. And this thing is just still screaming. The all mechanism is allows, it pretty much has no base case. So it says anything else that I haven't specified is also okay. And one other interesting part of this extension is it'll use OpenRDAP, which is the new version of Whois, sorry, if you have ever done a Whois lookup. It'll do that to see if the domains in the SPF and DMARC records are registered. And if they're not, you can then go and register them and authoritatively use their record against themselves. So that's what this at the bottom is showing. The following domains used by the SPF record are available to purchase. So it has a lot of content that I couldn't possibly cover in a 1 hour webcast, but please, everybody, feel free to go download it, use it, submit pull requests, submit issues on GitHub, and the whole nine. I think there's a little bit more. Yeah, maybe another 60 seconds or so. So there's the % equals 0. Yeah. And should be hitting. Now we have ARC, which we weren't able to cover, but it's very similar to DKIM. Here's all the DKIM keys that are weak, and it's telling you how to crack them and whatnot. All right, so these are all the protocols that are incorporated into MailFail. And we've touched on a few of them. DKIM, DMARC, SPF, but there's a lot more content there. So in conclusion, set up an SPF record for every subdomain. SPF is not similar to DMARC in that it'll just go to the base domain and then assume that applies to all the subdomains. You need an SPF record for every subdomain. Set your DMARC policies to reject or quarantine. Don't use PCT for %. Set up DMARC reporting, and email is a garbage fire, in conclusion. So if you'd like some references, here are the 3 best videos I've found. Sean Whalen has done an excellent job explaining DMARC, SPF, everything at a B-Sides Cleveland, I think it was. And you could go there, watch that. It'll give you another perspective of this. How to spoof 97% of emails is a long webcast done by Chris Powell, and Marcelo did a phenomenal DEF CON talk on spoofing this thing called mail channels. And it's a really interesting talk. So if you want to watch 3 things, those are the 3 I'd recommend. And that was a lot. I'm sure there's maybe 1 or 2 questions. So let me reopen Discord.
So before you move on, congratulations. Well done, Jack. It's your first Black Hills Information Security webcast. You did fantastic.
First time.
Yep. For those of you that attended today, I know you might have to run. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being a part of the community that we've brought together for you to share your knowledge with each other. If you are in Discord and you forgot to do the Hackett, you can always go into the Hackett channel and do that. And we'll go ahead and give you the manual edition. And so you'll work on your way to your 10 rewards and 20 rewards and 30 rewards. All right. So Jack.
Well, you can turn your camera back on.
Yeah.
Feel like people want to see your face again.
Yeah, I'm
working on it. There you go.
Hopefully I'm not laggy. I think I was having some like connection issues throughout it, but
the audio is great.
So Jack, this is the question I ask every single tester, and I know there's a bit of a delay between us right now. Jack, I ask this question to every tester. When you're on a test and you're having trouble gaining access, do you think their security is good, or do you think your skills need improvement?
Could be a bit of both. Like there's always room to improve, but there's endless vulnerabilities out there. I realistically think there's always a way in, but you just might not be looking in the right spots. You might not have the right expertise, but that's the beauty of having so many different testers, is that if you do a pen test, and you most likely will not get the same pen tester twice, so you'll get different perspectives on the same environment, which is very, very valuable to a customer.
If you do need a pen test, you know where to find us. Now is the time to reach out, especially for Q3 and Q4. We want to make sure that we get you in and get your pen test this year. If you need a continuous pen test, you know where to find us. All right, so Jack, to finalize all this, and then we'll do some Q&A. But I always ask everyone, if you could sum up today's webcast in one final thought, what would it be?
MailFail.
Okay.
Oh, and one thought or one word?
No, one final thought, but one word's great.
One word's fine.
No, that's fantastic.
Okay. I think it gets the point across. Email is very, very difficult. It's trying to put duct tape on something that's a legacy protocol that just can't be updated because it's so legacy and so integrated into everyday life. So it's just duct tape on duct tape on duct tape.
Ryan, I think you're controlling Discord right now. Could you go to the announcements channel? So if you joined us today, thank you so much for being here. There was one quick announcement I wanted to make, is that we launched the new mega deck of backdoors and breaches. What that means, if you go to play.backdoorsandbreaches.com, if you go there, you'll see the new mega deck, which is every single card we've ever made for backdoors and breaches in one playable deck, which means you can go to the scenario tools in the bottom right hand corner, you can go to custom, and you can select any scenario you can possibly think of from all the decks that we've ever created. And so if we add more decks in the future, we'll keep adding more cards to the mega deck, which means you can essentially put any scenario together you could you can imagine. So if there's a APT group out there, you can build that scenario. If there's IOCs that you're seeing, TTPs, you can put all that together into one scenario so that you and your teams can practice that. So thank you to our dev team that put that together. And thank you to Connor who helped, and thanks to all the companies that worked with us to create expansion decks. All right. So we're going to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining us. But if you have questions, feel free to ask them in the Q&A right now. And we're going to stick around for like 10 minutes with Jack and do rapid fire Q&A. So if you're here and you want a question, feel free to ask it again.
Yeah,
Ask it again.
The chat was very active today, so we probably missed one of your questions. Yeah, ask it again. And who would like to see Jack give another webcast? I feel like you just crushed it for your first time.
Yeah, Jack.
Yeah. Yes.
The next slot
you, guys.
available is in March of next year, Jack.
Another.
Yeah, we've already filled up to March of next
Fantastic.
year.
Plenty of time.
Yeah.
Plenty of time. They all want more. So yeah.
All right. So how do we get a recording? The recording's available pretty much
Immediately.
instantaneously on YouTube. Can you link to the list of compiled DKIM selectors, please?
Should I stop sharing screen right now?
You can. Yeah.
Ryan kind of controls whatever's being shown, but if you want to share something else, you can.
No, I was just gonna. Oh, it should be fine actually. I didn't know if it was gonna show my screen.
Here's a question. So as you're sharing the links, getting that together. Deb, do you want to? I'll grab one question. You grab another.
Sure.
I grab one.
Are you looking in Zoom?
I'm in Q. Yeah, Zoom.
Okay. Do you want to go first?
He's working on the links.
Oh, gotcha.
But while you're working on that, let's see if you can answer this question. Jack.
No.
Can you hear us?
I feel like I might not be able to ask Jack any questions.
Did we lose Jack at the very end?
I stopped sharing screen. I think it was causing issues.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Cool.
This is a question. If MailFail doesn't show all the
No,
protocols,
I'm still here. Hello.
Oh no.
Oh, he's so delayed.
He's way behind us. That's like that's many seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I think we'll do is we'll have Jack incorporate all the answers into like a blog post.
Yeah.
Version 2.
Yeah. I mean,
Well, to the 478 of you still here, hopefully you're joining us for Wild West Hackenfest in the future.
Hello?
Or in 2 weeks for the next webcast. Jack, there's a massive delay. So I think we're going to skip the Q&A.
I'm going to mute him. Oh, he left.
Oh, no.
Okay, well, he's still here. Just decided.
It's kind of like we had an ending and then we had a second ending. And
Hello.
the second ending wasn't as great.
Yeah, I think we need to kill it.
Yeah.
We need to get North Korea just found who was messing with their email. That's correct, Smithy.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to let this one die for today. We'll get to your questions in some way in the future. If Jack can go into Discord and respond to them, that would be great. We appreciate you being here. Seriously. Thank you for wanting to improve yourself and wanting to improve your organization and improve your security, because by you improving your security, it improves it for so many people. And so you're doing your due diligence. You're doing what you can to make the world a better and safer place. And we appreciate the fact that you chose to show up today, that you want to get better. You want your organization to get better. And thank you for choosing us to spend your time with. Deb, you have Deb's final thoughts. What do you got?
Deb's final thoughts?
Yeah.
Well, Jack's was MailFail. I thought that was nice. Well, happy 4th of July to all those who celebrate in the US. And I don't know. I don't have really any, just to reiterate, thank you guys for showing up. We know that this is like time is your most valuable commodity in Jack's back. But yes, thank you that you choose to spend it with us. We don't take it for granted and we see you. So that's it.
All right, Ryan, let's kill it. Kill with fire, Ryan.
Kill it before Jack says something.
Kill it with fireworks. Kill it. Kill it with fireworks.
See you guys.
All right.
Recording stopped.
Jack.
Jack,